Hello, Laurie. We have Laurie Olivier here, everyone, to share about her experience, dealing with migraines throughout her life and also her experience inside of the migraine resilience method. So, Laurie, welcome, and thank you for taking the time out this evening to speak with us.
No problem.
I
Excited.
I'll start by asking you to introduce yourself, a little overview of where you live and family life, work life, that kind of thing.
Okay. So my name is Laurie Olivier. I live in Sudbury, Ontario with my husband, my 14-year-old son, and my dog. I'm an educational assistant at the Sudbury Catholic District School Board. Um, I've been employed there for about 8 years. Um, I've always worked with kids though, so really it's going on probably closer to 20 years altogether, working with kids. So that's definitely been my specialty. It is pretty demanding and it's pretty busy because you're always on, right? It's a very hands-on job. So yeah, I think,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, you're not too far from me. I know that well, still about 6 hours away.
Mhm.
And so it's nice to have someone else in Ontario with me here in Canada. So I know absolutely like anybody who's working in a teaching role, anybody who's working with kids, it's the type of position that really does require your full attention and
Mhm.
all your energy. And
Yes.
then especially if you're going home and to more, kids or even, teens and like family life, it's kind of nonstop in that
It
sense. You don't get much of a break. And,
No,
and
not
I
too
know
much.
when I went back to work after having, babies were now able to be in daycare and school, it's like for me, I know that it felt like a break when
Yes.
going to work. It felt less, but I know for teachers who are still surrounded by these kids who rely so much on you, they're much more needy. They're always in requiring your attention. It must be a hard role to be in if you're not feeling well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like a little causes some anxiety knowing that yeah, you when you do have a migraine or you're not feeling 100% that you can't, right? And you kind of have to be able to give close to 100% times, especially when you're dealing with kids and younger kids. And I've
Mhm.
worked with special needs. So, yeah, it takes a lot. And so, yeah, it causes a little bit of anxiety when you know you kind of have it's kind of like I describe it walking through quicksand. Like,
Mm.
yeah, those sometimes it can be up to a week for me that I'll feel bad. And then kind of once it's done, trying to get back on track and getting your energy back because it just feels like it's been so depleted. So yeah, that can be quite a challenge.
Yeah. Wow. So when we first met, when we first got introduced and you started into the program, what were you dealing with? What was life like? And what was the level of severity, frequency, intensity of these migraine episodes? And, even what else, how long had you been dealing with it for? And how much did it impact you in your life?
I've suffered, I think, from headaches, like pretty bad like headaches from as long as I can remember. So I don't know if it was puberty, but if not, pretty close, right?
Mhm.
That's when I started my period and stuff in my menstrual cycle. I always had issues around that and headaches, and it gradually got worse. Um, and but it got really bad, like, I would say more into that migraine zone when I had my son, after I had my son. And so I remember one time I felt like I almost needed to go to the hospital, it was so bad, and at
Mhm.
that time, like, I would vomit and have diarrhea. It just felt like my whole body would shut down also with the
Yeah.
pain. So that was alarming because it was happening a monthly. It was sort of happening along with my menstrual cycle. So that was
Mhm.
once a month where I was feeling that horrible and that sick. And so uh, I got over the counter meds. I'd take a lot of Advil,
Mhm.
and when that wasn't working, I started taking other prescription meds. I think it was Imitrex. At first, I had a nasal spray,
Mhm.
and then eventually my doctor, suggested I try an IUD to
Mhm.
see if that would help alleviate some of the symptoms. So I did finally do that after some time kind of hesitating.
Yeah.
Um, it did. It helped improve. I found like they weren't as severe,
Hmm.
and less frequent, I would say. But gradually, I feel like during COVID, when I couldn't get it replaced, I
Hmm.
was sort of back in the same boat where I was having them again more frequently,
Hmm.
um, intense enough where sometimes they're like lasting for a week. No more
Hmm.
vomiting and stuff, so at least that was a little bit of an improvement.
Hmm.
And I just didn't like taking the migraine meds, like the
Yeah.
triptans, because they would work for a certain amount of time, and then I just
Hmm.
felt like I was taking a lot,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because the migraines tend to last for a long time. So, yeah, I was always kind of reaching for that, and just
So
they were
it's
just making me feel bad too.
So it's good. Yeah. And sorry to interrupt, but getting back to
Mhm,
the IUD, because I know
mhm.
just when you're mentioning, it helped and then it didn't, and it's
Yep.
helping again. But I don't know if you remember listening or Bobby Ann's story, right? But she also some significant improvement after getting an IUD inserted. And she did have even like 2 whole years of almost, really
Mhm.
significant improvement. But then it fell way back. It just all of a sudden, because she
Yeah.
had not addressed, as you are doing,
Yes.
like had
Yeah.
not addressed the root causes and worked on all of these things, that we're doing, the gut health, the inflammation, the general imbalances and deficiencies, right? And so what can happen is something like that works for a time might stop working, and you kind of be back at square one, or in a worse position like she ended up being, unfortunately. And having it removed didn't help, having it re-put in didn't help, and that's
Mhm.
when we started working together. And now she's golden, like she's great, right? And that's, I know, I can't put words in your mouth, but I know that you are someone who would rather not have to do interventions if it's not necessary. So while it's
Yes,
helping, great.
absolutely.
But while it's not, so it's great that you are, for the time being, even though it may still be helping you to some degree, it's like you're also addressing the other stuff that's underlying
Yeah.
things, right? And not
Yeah.
using it as, you're not just seeing it as a band-aid or using it as a band-aid. You are still seeking improvement, because it didn't obviously do everything. It didn't
Yeah.
even get you the maybe level of improvement that Bobby Ann initially experienced, but it was enough to stick with it and still be
Mhm.
there, right? Um, but you're saying too, like the other medications, so complementing that, say the improvements you experienced through that, you're still trying different medications. But I know you had a really big issue with triptans, like as far as for you, some of the side effects were very unwanted and very
Yeah, they're
problematic.
just yeah, overall, they don't make you feel that great. Yeah, it
Yeah.
will alleviate, the pain in the meantime so you can kind of keep functioning,
Yeah.
right, like you need to, so it's kind of necessary sometimes. But yeah,
Hmm.
overall, they just leave you feeling exhausted, and for me, it was kind of depressive, because
Hmm.
especially I was taking more than just one, because one just doesn't do it for me anyway, right?
Yeah.
So and I was usually pairing that with Advil, and those were the things I was heavily relying on, and they weren't really cutting it, right? It's I
Yeah.
knew it's just kind of like a Band-Aid solution. So, yeah, in the meantime, we started working together, and I started to discover different solutions, things I could add, and they were, really helpful to kind of
Yeah.
add to my medicine bag, so to speak. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, while working on some of the deeper issues, right? And so,
Yeah. And you were dealing with a few other things that maybe weren't top priority for you, but you did definitely mentioned as, other symptoms or other health signs that things weren't all well, and I don't know if you want to get into some of those other top issues for you, like one being fatigue, which I know a lot of migraine
oh,
people deal with, whether it's a cause or one of the underlying factors, or whether it's a result of being in pain so often, or having to deal with these episodes that can be very draining and involve some of those body systems that will lead to fatigue. I know that was a big one for you. Did you want to
that's
talk
huge.
about any of
Yeah.
the other top sort of
Well, like I was gonna say, like probably about last summer is when I felt like I was experiencing headaches, migraines almost every other day. Like it just felt
Mhm.
like I was dealing with them constantly. Like
Mhm.
so it amplified and it got worse. And it was like, and then you just get a little bit desperate because you're like, wait, is this what things are going to be looking like? It can't be
Mm.
continuing to get worse, because then you start to worry, like, how am I going to continue to work? You only have so many, sick days. And so,
And you
um,
would have been on break from your work in that
yeah,
period, right?
I was on
Yeah.
break. So I was, I just, you just kind of are at a loss of what could be
Mhm.
causing them to become that much more worse.
Like nothing happened in your life that
Um,
amplified or caused them to ramp up at that point.
no, not
Yeah.
like other than probably not doing all the things I've learned to do better
Mhm.
at this point. Maybe that
It was like
having,
a downward, you didn't notice, but there were
mm,
things that were just
yeah,
piling on or,
yeah,
kind of continuing to worsen that you weren't aware of.
like not staying hydrated enough, not, and
Mhm.
then maybe trying to go out and do some exercising, but because I really wasn't in really the
You
shape
didn't
to do
feel
it, it
well.
just
Yeah.
made it worse. And a lot of times that was starting to trigger episodes, which was alarming as well, because I'm like, oh, now I can't even work out or be active more. That's going to trigger something.
Can
Like,
be a catch 22 for sure, where
yeah,
it's supposed to help or it's going to help, but you can't bring yourself to do it. Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah. And yeah, it was just piling up until
Mhm.
finally, I think I finally came across you and
Yeah.
some information about that, and just started to look into that and the Facebook group, the one that's public, learning a little bit there. And yeah, I forget when we actually started. Actually, at this point, was
I
it?
don't have the exact date either, but it was
And
at
I
least
know,
16 weeks ago now,
yeah,
probably more like 19. Well, you've completed the program a few weeks back, but
I want
you
to say
know,
November, but is that way
yeah,
off?
it
Yeah,
does sound,
yeah,
no, it sounds about right, November, December.
November.
Um,
Okay,
yeah. And what did you, I guess, you're talking about kind of reaching that point. You're like,
yeah.
I am at my limit. I need to do something, change, do something different, find the answer to what's going on. Did you
I,
have any, like, what were your thought processes around that? Because I know you had mentioned, when we first met, you had mentioned that some of the things you had tried beyond even medications in the past, like you had tried some different things, right? And so did
yeah.
you have hesitation around getting into something like this?
So I was always searching, right? You're always looking, trying. Well, I always was always looking for solutions, and you can find stuff anywhere on the internet. Like, and so those, when you don't have any real direction, you're just kind of taking a shot in the dark. Like, you have no idea what you're doing. But I came across, it was a different kind of program, where like hormonally based. It was called the
Mhm.
Hormone Harmony Period, which actually got me to a better point. Once I was done with it. And I think at one point I was down to, less intense migraines. They weren't as weren't as long, but then I kind of abandoned everything. So
Mm,
that might have been going well for a little bit, and then I just didn't keep up with, I guess, a lot of some of the suggestions.
yeah,
And really, starting to realize second time around doing a different program with a different approach, that you really do have to maintain all of these things that you put in place so that you can have long-term results. Because
yeah,
when you're starting to experience less episodes,
yeah.
it's for a reason. It's
Hmm.
because you've been making better choices and
Yeah,
doing all the right things to help them. And so, yeah,
yeah,
you have to, it can be a long road though. It really can be, when you start to kind of go down it, because you start to really get into the root stuff, right? And then you
yeah,
start to understand what that really means. Like, oh, okay, so, there's some stomach issues. And I also found out I had a lot of, well, some deficiencies.
yeah.
So after I got my blood work done, which I hadn't done in years. So yeah, finding out all those
Yeah,
things too.
this is the
And
thing. Like you'd been through that program, and I know, remember you saying you found it hard to follow because, I mean, depending on too how it's laid out and how much support you get, it can feel, next to impossible depending on how much they're asking you to do it all at once and how
yeah,
it's laid out. But even the improvements you can see sometimes, and you mentioned having to stick with something lifelong, and
yeah,
this
yeah,
is true and not true all at the same time. Certain things, yes, like those core foundational things
yeah,
are always going
yeah,
to be important. The things you have control over, the things that most people do know in the back of their minds. But the thing is, you can be super like that, and that might have helped you stay on a better track, let's say, than you had when you first came to see me. Absolutely. But as you say, if these certain deficiencies were in place and these
Yeah.
imbalances, you can't stick with certain supplements that are going to support hormones if you just stay with the same one. It's almost like chasing your tail. You're going to keep needing them for life, and likelihood is they're going to not become pretty ineffective eventually, and could cause some other type of problem. But there's still, yes, there's the momentum and the consistency with these core foundational things, but there's also, if there's some missing pieces because not enough digging was done into what
Yeah.
your personal issues were. But I think it probably helped you to have gone through something like that before. And like you say, you
Yes.
kind of knew that it had helped. You knew that things had fallen off, and you were able to kind of then reevaluate why did it fall off, and what can I do differently this time, to make sure that I stick with the things that are important, or the non-negotiables, as we say. And as things
Yeah.
improve and evolve, there's going to be certain things that you need to stick with, and some other things that you don't need to do anymore, like take this particular supplement, or do this extra kind of management technique during the day, right?
Yeah, and I think I did find it a little restrictive just in terms of like the diet plan that kind of
Mhm.
went with it, or the eating plan. It was like very low carb, and I think a lot of that was sort of could trigger a little bit more headaches sometimes also.
Mhm.
And so that was, I think that was one of the things that was a little bit harder to stick to.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, it would be a bit of a deterrent, especially if that was one of your goals. Like, it wasn't
yeah,
these symptoms, but it was also that element that was bringing you there. And then if that ramps up, and you don't have somebody reassuring you this is normal, it'll pass, or
yeah,
you'll get to a
yeah,
point. But and you may have benefited from maybe your plan being tailored uh, for your situation. So if
yeah,
that sort of service or offer isn't, an opportunity isn't there for that, it can make it a little harder to stick with, for sure. But
yeah,
yes, I'm so happy that you decided to, take a leap of faith and reinvest in your health and reconsider doing something like that again. Uh, and yeah, and I know that you did pretty quickly had signs that things were moving in the right direction, right?
oh yeah, for sure.
Like, maybe you can walk us through how you were feeling, even, a month and a half in, what kind of changes you started to see.
Well, right away, when I started using some of the essential oils, I started drinking the lemon ginger tea with the salt in it every
Mhm.
morning. I'm still doing that. I had the deep blue rub. So as soon as I got the kit, kind of implemented all those strategies. The frankincense kind of on the roof of the mouth. So a few times I was actually able to, the headache went away on its own. So that was the first time
Yeah,
that it ever happened to me where I
yeah,
didn't have
amazing.
to go take some Advil, or like I actually, by the time I got home, instead of being in even worse pain because it's just amplified, it was actually starting to dissipate and it actually went away.
It's exciting, isn't it?
So
The first time
yeah,
that happens.
it was very exciting. So definitely felt like, okay, these things can really work. They definitely are helpful, and so that was exciting to kind of figure that out, right? And to want
Yeah,
to continue to use them as some strategies to, yeah, help. And then
yeah.
as we went on, we just kind of introduced more and more things, right? The deeper we got into it. And
Yeah, and even the things that you started out doing in those first 4 weeks, 5 weeks, I know, because it's food related things, hydration related things, obviously trying to, as an episode might start up, we're still getting them if it's so early on, and the
yep,
likelihood is we're not going to be able to completely resolve things immediately, right? So, but bringing those tools that not only have that short-term impact, but if you're doing certain things consistently daily, using the oils on a daily basis for different sort of skills you're trying to develop, or improvements you're trying to make in different aspects of what contributes to good health. So like sleep, for example, and stress. And, if you do have pain, like, how can we alleviate this without the medication, which has downsides, and how can we do it with the oils? So there's that element. And then because you're working on the food and this, like, all these things together, you already are addressing root causes, even if we weren't sure at first
What they
what
were.
exactly we're looking at. Like we did know, for example, you're dealing with some digestive stuff, like there was some symptoms there. So it's like, oh, okay, what can we do to improve them so you're not as uncomfortable? But also let's watch that as a symptom. Like let's watch what's going on there to know if we're doing something well, something right for your body. And I know that that was something that was giving us signs early on that we were also addressing gut health, with what
Mhm.
we were doing for you.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And then when our digestion is better, then that brings up energy. When we're not having as many painful days, that brings up energy. And I know energy was something else that um, seemed to improve for you pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, and actually hydration was a big one too, right? And it seems
Mm,
so simple, but actually it's easily forgotten. And I know probably when I was sort of at my worst, yeah, I just wasn't even,
mm.
yeah, definitely not
Especially if you're
hydrated.
feeling nauseous, right? Like for
Yeah,
people that aren't feeling great, you don't want to put anything
no, you
down.
definitely don't want to. And just staying on top of that and staying on top
Mhm.
of it daily, just going, okay, this isn't, I know you had talked about that, non-negotiable, right? Like I
Yeah.
need to get water in every day, a certain amount, if not more. And I know you had said if you're drinking coffee, you need even more than that. And so just starting to be mindful of all of these things and aware of these things,
Mhm.
even noticing, okay, so I've cleaned up my diet. And so now I'm like, okay, so if I do feel anything gas wise, bloating wise, uncomfortable, well, what did I eat? What was it
Mhm.
then? Because I hadn't been. So all of a sudden, how come it's back? What was I doing? What did I eat? What was so kind of just going back and investigating and
Mhm.
feeling empowered to be able to do that instead of just, oh, now I'm dealing with this again. Well, no, we can
Yeah.
kind of fix it. What happened, right? What
Yeah.
did
You became an amazing detective by the end
yeah,
of this process.
yeah,
Yes.
so you just learn to be really mindful of all
Yeah.
of these things, and it becomes easier. So the more you
Mhm.
do it, it does feel overwhelming at first, but because I've been at it for a while now overall, it's the more you do it, the more you kind of want to do it because you don't want to slide back into poor health again. It's
Mhm.
not worth it. You've come so
Mhm.
far, you've worked really hard. I've worked really hard to get to a
Yes, you
better
have.
spot. So you don't want to give it up, right? So you want to
Yeah.
keep building and keep moving forward. So it's been, yeah, and it's definitely a process because like sometimes it's a little bit hard to move forward or there's some challenges. Like
Mhm.
when you are working on things and things aren't working out exactly the way you'd hope them, you have to
Mhm.
relook at things again. So it's a process and having
Yeah.
patience with it and not giving up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah, good advice. That's exactly it. And that's where it's true. And I find for in my experience, it's around the week 7, 8 mark, 9, that I find people will almost sometimes hit that point where they feel it's most difficult, actually. Like, yes, the very beginning when you're trying to kind of get your bearings and what do I need to be doing and how does this work and what should I
Right.
be
That's,
paying attention to, getting into starting to change habits especially for someone that's not used to testing and tuning on their own at all. They've kind of done the
yeah.
same thing the same way for years and years. And now all of a sudden they're being asked to even make this drink in the morning or eat these
Yep.
foods instead. And it can be tricky, right? But yeah, at a point you get into the flow. But I do feel there's like I don't know, this not, I don't want to call it a wall, but there's this sticky point around a certain midpoint, and it's either symptoms have been, let's say, improving, but they kind of stall a little bit,
Yep.
or even it could be that somebody starts a new protocol, like a side protocol,
Hmm.
because we've determined they need to work on a particular underlying imbalance or deficiency, and they might see some symptoms come back a little bit more, and then it's anxiety provoking or it's worrisome. Like, does this mean that it's not working, or it's and usually it's just a matter of you have to just give it a bit more time. Maybe we'll ease off this, like we'll go into it a bit more slowly so that we're not experiencing the ramp up in symptoms. But um, it's getting, once you get past that though, it's usually the rest is not going to say smooth sailing or
No,
continuous
but
upward trajectory, but the mojo comes back, like the
yeah.
motivation and the excitement of it all comes back, because then you know, on to the next thing and you kind of get over that hump and it gets better again. So how do you feel about how things are now, you know, or at the end of the 16 weeks, I should say, how do you feel about where you started versus where you ended, where you landed, and what was your, thoughts on the improvement?
Well, I've learned so much. So
Mhm.
I'm definitely a different spot than when I started. And just recently, like I've been headache migraine free for the past few weeks, but the last one I would have had, I think it was in April, maybe second last week of April, I think. And yeah, it was pretty painful, but I also I told you, introduced the magnesium. So
Mhm.
taking a little bit more of that to help alleviate the symptoms. So I think I was
Yeah.
taking about 900 milligrams of the magnesium,
Mhm.
like for,
Like
well,
in the episode, like
in the episode.
as a way
Yeah.
to manage the episode. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, wait, I was told to maybe try this and to
Mhm.
kind of increase the amount I was taking. And so I did. I'm like, okay, so this is what I'm going to try as an added. Yeah, and I think it really helped shorten the duration of that and
But
cleared it up quicker. So
yeah.
that's just another thing that I can continue to use, continue
Mhm.
to take. I take it every day anyway, just at a lesser amount. And then I think even leading up to it, or if I know, especially if it's around menstruation or that time, if I can kind of
Mhm.
feel that out, then I will just start to increase it a little bit
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, we
So
didn't mention that part. You know, like cycle related
yeah,
um uh migraines, because that's, you know, the type that they're going to be harder. They are going to be harder to manage. They are going to be likely more severe than one at a different time of the month. So, but that's something now that you have a plan around, you've got some strategies around that, right? And
yeah, just feeling better and stronger. That
yeah.
there's different things that I can do now while continuing to work on some of those root issues.
Mhm.
Um, Also, like eating, I'm definitely more mindful of that. I'm staying away from things that were not going to contribute that were going to contribute
Yeah.
to migraine episodes. That was probably one of my most favorite parts of the program, is the meal plans and learning about that.
Mhm.
um, like I always considered myself to be pretty good eater,
Yeah.
but when you kind of really get to clean things up, definitely improve digestion. And so
Yeah.
that's not something I'm willing to compromise on anymore either. I'm
Mhm.
like, no, this feels better for me. So I've kept the gluten out. I've kept for the most part. I'm gonna say there might be a few instances where it might have been in there. I'm like, okay, well, we'll see. It didn't really affect me, but I still feel better without it.
Do you
Not gonna
find
probably
you have
ever.
to like use willpower to be staying? Because I know you just kind of explained that you know the difference in how it makes you feel. You're not willing to compromise. Do you still find, because I know a lot of people worry about that, like I just love this so much, and if you're going to ask me to cut it out, and first of all, I will not ask anyone to cut anything out unless I feel it's necessary for the person's plan. But there are some certain ground like staple things that yes are inflammatory for everyone that I will suggest we wean down on and then eliminate for a time at
Mhm.
least. And as you say, like you're planning on keeping it out because you know how it makes you feel and
Yeah.
you know the like the rationale behind it and all that. But is there anything that you, let's say, no, you don't feel well with, but you kind of still crave it, or you still really have to use like strong willpower to stay away from?
No, not really. I'm gonna say because I've learned how to introduce some replacements for some of those things,
Mm,
which have really helped, and I enjoy
yeah,
them. So that kind of
great.
takes the edge off, like
Yeah.
um, the yogurt, the almond yogurt, the coconut yogurt. Like I
Mm,
like all that stuff. So for me,
yeah.
that I actually prefer it now. So
Yeah.
I don't I dairy. I didn't eat a lot of it anyway to begin with.
Yeah.
So
That makes that
no,
a
I
bit
don't.
easier.
Yeah, so that was a little, and I was gonna say gluten. Sometimes that's probably a harder one for me because I
Yeah.
mean it is in a lot of things.
The
So
processed things, yeah,
the
like the
processed
yummy
things
treats
or
and the
like spring rolls, a few like
yeah.
everyone, but you can find a lot of that gluten free
It's
also.
getting better and better. It is. And
There's
even
so
the
many.
quality of the gluten-free stuff is getting better.
Yeah,
Whereas before,
yeah,
even I wouldn't even suggest it because the ingredients are just awful. It would be
yeah,
like trading one problem for another. But there are
yeah.
more healthful and tasty gluten-free things out there.
There is.
Yeah.
So if it's a really big craving, I could kind of just try and find it with somewhere. So yeah, that's been a little bit easier too. And uh, the alternate, the bread, I think I've been getting it at Costco. It's really good.
Yeah. They have a few types
Yeah,
there,
keep
at
it
least where I am.
toasted. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I mean that kind of helps with that craving.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah, overall,
So how do you
it's
feel like these changes, like, I mean, yes, you're kind of in the flow. There's still things that you are focused on. We know that there's still progress you still want to make, and there's a
yeah,
plan in
for sure.
place for that. So you're kind of off on your own right now for the time being, doing that
Yeah,
because you're doing pretty well, and you know what you've got to do, and you are not having
yes,
trouble implementing it. Staying accountable to yourself and all of that, which is fantastic. You still have your support, with knowing future tests you'll get to make sure that you're continuing to actually improve those numbers and other tests that you may get if you want more information to keep improving, right? We've got that kind of set. And, but how do you feel as far as these improvements, going from more regular, is still, you have some intensity still with your migraines, but you know that what things you can make them a little less intense, less
yeah,
lengthy, sounds like.
yeah,
But they're fewer and far between. Almost no
yeah.
headaches. Like the headaches issue, I know is much better too. Um,
That's pretty non-existent,
they're
I'm
pretty
gonna say at
non-existent.
this
Okay.
point. Yeah, I won't just get a headache, not very often. Actually
Oh,
the other day, but I could directly figure out what it was from. I went for a
yeah.
walk with my dog. I came home. It's been finally nice out.
Yes.
And came in and my eyes were so itchy.
Allergy
They
season.
just
Yeah.
and then my head was kind of bugging me, but I'm like, okay, well, that's what that's from. It
Yeah.
was probably because it happened again, just less intense.
Yeah.
Uh, because either I'm
Oh,
getting
and we
used
know, I
to
mean,
it.
yes, pollen exposure for anybody, if they have too
Yeah,
much like allergens coming at them, it's going to have an effect. However, some
yeah,
people are going to be more sensitive than others. My son right
yeah,
now, I know that I have to deal with things for him because of the severity of his allergies right at the moment. But this is as you are still working on, like
yes,
continued improvements in gut health and the just the balance in your microbiome. And we know that allergies and reacting that way, it is a sign of just more gut work to be done. So that's good. But yes, in the time being, of course, having stuffed sinuses can create that problem for migraine people.
yeah,
For sure, like headaches and like just the pressure, right? If you're like stuffed up. Um, but I know that actually something I had noted, oh, this was you had a good vacation where you didn't you like a
yeah.
little
There
where you had
was,
no migraine and
yeah,
you really, yeah, have significantly improved on the number of headaches and migraines.
yeah.
But as I say, there's still more progress, of course, that to be made. But for now, do you find yourself like, how do you feel, I guess, as far as, um, knowing that you've got a work week ahead of you, and are you feeling any different emotionally or when it comes to, your health in general, when it comes to how headaches and migraines might interfere with your life and with your work? Uh, do you feel differently about things now?
So the last episode that I did have, so I was worried because I thought I was gonna have to cancel plans because it had sort of started a little bit during the week.
Mm,
And then I had plans on the weekend, and so I was like, oh,
mm,
but you know what? I didn't rush to cancel anything. I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna sit with this for a minute, and I'm gonna
mm.
see what I can do here and see if I
Yeah.
can improve things. And so
Yeah.
by this Saturday, it might have started a little bit on the Wednesday. Anyway, by the Saturday, I was okay and maybe feeling a bit tired. My
Yeah.
head was not hurting, and so I could enjoy uh,
Amazing.
the plans that I had without
Yeah.
having to cancel. And so I felt pretty good about that. So, and that's when I
Yeah.
was using the magnesium a little bit more and kind of
Yeah.
putting all the things in place. Um, yeah, so less bummed out also, right? Because then you
Cool.
feel a little
That's
bit more depressed when you start to cancel things.
yes.
And, I just went at my own pace, right? Like, so I
Mhm.
still enjoyable time, and that's huge.
That's so awesome. And then
So,
the next time that same thing happens, you'll
yes,
remember that that's in your now like locked in your memory. That is
yes,
again, and I think mind and beliefs have so much power over our physical expression and our physical reaction to things, right? So you
Yes,
having that positive experience, the next time you have something starting up, um, you're not catastrophizing maybe the way you used to in the past.
yes,
Have
yeah,
not only some tools that you know you can turn to, but you also know they can be effective for you, which is
yes.
super cool, right?
It's huge.
Um,
It's a big
yeah.
deal. And even just like at that point, I hadn't taken any medication or anything. So even
Mhm.
to be able to operate with a clearer head
Yeah.
and not feeling
Right,
like,
right. Yeah.
kind of out of it, you feel a little out of it and you're not really present. So that was a
Mhm.
pretty good feeling too. And
For
plus, when
sure.
the hardest time when you say, "Do you get any cravings?" or I feel like the worst cravings I do get, or the worst times when I kind of want to abandon everything, is when I do have a migraine. I want to eat bad, like everything kind of comes back, and I want to
Yeah.
abandon everything.
You're like, what's the
So
point? I feel like hell
I
anyway.
just I don't know what it is. I just crave all of a sudden. If there's cravings, they're
Yeah.
happening more at that time. Like, okay, now I want to just sit here and
Mhm.
I want to eat a bag of chips and I want to
Mhm.
like have too much salt and so and eat something bad. So yeah, just hanging on and going, well, that's not going to help you feel any better. It's not going to make it
Mhm.
go away any quicker. You're probably going to prolong it. And
Yes.
because I don't want that, I don't want it any longer than it needs to be or worse. So hanging on and staying strong through that.
Yeah. And you know it'll make a difference because you've experienced it now. And you know
Yeah.
what? It's not just now what you're doing in an episode, like the extra magnesium. That's fantastic. You found that that is another element that can help
Yes. It's
you get
another,
over an episode faster. But it's
yeah.
everything you've done throughout those 16 weeks with the consistency, with the food changes, with
Yeah.
the
The food
timing of
is
the food, with, for the hydration, with the sleep, with the stress, with the, all the things that you have been doing, like you've learned about, started to implement, then did consistently, layered on. You know, like now you've got some, we've fiddled with the supplements a bit because, you know, you knew you needed to take these things, but they weren't agreeing with you. So we had to switch it up, find another approach. You know, we're
yeah.
doing that kind of thing. Well, all those things build on one another and they are all contributing and they are the reason why that magnesium, that extra magnesium during that episode is effective.
Yes.
So, and for anyone listening, like I don't want you to be discouraged from trying magnesium. You know, it's
No.
great. I think all
No, but
migraine people should test out. And again,
yeah.
like I'm not working with you with, you know, out there with, if I'm not working personally with you, I'm not giving you advice, personal advice on what is going to help and not help. But I think with magnesium glycinate, it's a pretty core foundational thing. Then we know that a lot of people with migraine are deficient, have deficiency of levels in the brain. We know that if you are deficient, it could be contributing to your migraines and the severity.
Yeah.
So might as well introduce it, start slow, just start with, you know, have some before bed or whatever. But uh, it may be that you need more than just the minimum
Yeah.
dose or several times a day. You may have needed, somebody might need much more than that. And for you, you know, it's helping you also in an episode. So that is something that people can try. Certainly try to have some magnesium during the episode, but don't be discouraged if it doesn't help the episode at this point in time. It doesn't mean that it can't be a tool at some point in the
Yeah.
future
Yeah.
once you layer a few
Also,
more things in.
something you had said to me, and you're like, well, have you ever thought of maybe taking a sick day and just kind of dealing with yourself? And I actually did that that time. And
Okay.
so it made it, I don't know if that also made a difference. I just took a day
Could
to
have very well. Yeah, it
rest,
very well could have.
stay hydrated,
Yeah.
and kind of just take care of myself a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're kind of pushing through,
It can
that's,
prolong it, it can make it worse, it can escalate it. Yeah,
yeah,
if the stress levels are higher, if you're not in an environment that is conducive to
yeah,
helping with your
and
symptoms and with your episode. And I find teachers, well, the ones that I've worked with anyways, you're so committed and you
yeah,
are the last ones to feel
yeah,
like you should or could take a day off. And
yeah.
so, I mean, again, I don't want to like remove teachers from the classroom by advising everybody who doesn't feel well to like step
No,
out, but it
it could have
is
a big difference, right? And you could
you
shorten
may
it.
and yeah, and you may
So,
have ended up missing or being half there for 5 days versus just taking a day off and then stepping back in and being your full potential,
So yeah,
being able to be 100% at 100% and do your job even better because of the
yeah,
time you took off. Yeah.
for sure. So that probably helped a lot too, and just kind of changing that mindset and
Hmm.
realizing, well, it needs to be dealt with, and just you need to take care of yourself too sometimes, because yeah, just pushing through all the time, well, I've been down that road,
Yeah.
and that doesn't lead anywhere good. And like you just said, things get worse and longer, and so you're out of the game even more. So yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Laurie, for sharing all that you have with us today. Is there anything else you wanted to share about your experience? Anything you wanted people to know? And then I would like to ask, how you would advise somebody who is dealing with a lot of migraine days every month, who's been dealing with it maybe for a very long time as well, and feeling a little bit lost or stuck as to what to do, where to turn next.
Well, one of the things I really appreciated was the prompting and like just to take the initiative to do some of these things for myself. You were
Mm.
really great at doing that. Like getting the blood work. And at that point, when I joined, I actually didn't have a family doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's right.
and just kind of introducing different healthcare practitioners, naturopath, like how all of these services can work together to help. And
Absolutely.
so,
Yeah.
and just prompting to get blood work done, and really all the guidance and like support was incredible. And because I really needed it. And sometimes when
Mhm.
you're at that point where you're in, a lot of pain and you're kind of feeling hopeless, you need it. You need somebody kind of on your side saying, yeah, you kind of, pick yourself up and kind of keep going. And here's all these great things that you can use in the process. So that was a huge thing for me, because I needed it.
Mhm.
I needed that kind of prompting and stuff to get it done, because we tend to kind of put ourselves last all the time and like not want to deal with it. And you
Yeah,
have to,
yeah. I find
yeah,
migraine people, I've said this before, but a lot of migraine people are type A personalities, very hardworking, very go, 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 and they've got a lot of responsibilities. And it's almost like they also though can't see that about themselves. They can't see how much they contribute. They are not able to see
yeah,
how much they're giving. They all they see are the maybe the
times when
downsides or
you can't.
the
Yeah.
missing components or the
The
things that
missing.
they're failing at
Yes.
or the things they're not doing well
Yes.
instead of focusing on the things you're doing really well. So then
For
you have
sure.
hard time asking for help or you don't think you should ask for help because you're such a capable person in every other part of
Yeah.
your life. But like you say, if you're not feeling well, it's very, very hard to always think you're not going to be expected to have all the expertise as these other practitioners and like you haven't gone to school for it. And so it would take a lot of, um, searching and even somebody who has done all of the education, it's hard to troubleshoot yourself. So it's like there's no, for anybody out there who might be like, I know a lot, I know so much, but it's, there must be something wrong with me. There's nothing the way I can be helped because I have tried everything or I've thought of
Yes.
everything and tried it. It doesn't mean that you're not a capable person. It doesn't mean if, asking for help and getting support, it doesn't reflect that you're not a capable and intelligent and you know motivated person. All it says is that it is hard to really look at your own situation and um, troubleshoot your own stuff. Sometimes you need that
You're
other person to bounce ideas
oh,
off
you
of and
definitely do. And you're very knowledgeable. And the thing that really got me when I was kind of reading about you and on the Facebook site is you've actually suffered from migraines yourself. And that's a big one, because I've never actually worked with somebody in a very similar position, right?
mm,
Someone that's, oh, I've had days like this and this is what was happening. And so yeah, when you have firsthand experience with it, and which is kind of what inspired you to kind of get involved and try to
yeah.
help other people and learn about it yourself and all the symptoms. So that's huge, right?
Mm.
When you have somebody that's actually knows exactly how it feels. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I will have
it's
sympathy. I will empathize. I won't
yeah,
necessarily just say poor you, and let
no,
you like curl into a ball into a dark room.
yes,
I will help to pull you out of that and get you out of it because I know how awful it's horrendous. It's to be, especially to
yes,
be in extreme pain when nothing's working, even the meds. Like that is, I don't want anybody to be in that position. I don't want anybody to have to deal with that ever, at
no,
any
and
point.
you're
So
right. That's one of the most frightening, and that's kind of what was prompting me to is when the meds are not working. So your last kind of line of defense, if that stops working, that's terrifying
Mhm.
because then what do you do? So you have to be able, so for me, you want to be able to explore other options and really find out what's going on so that it can get better.
Yeah.
So, and you have to want to, yeah, invest in yourself and put yourself first. Um, because you kind of asked at the beginning of the program, like, what's your whys? Why do you want to do this?
Mhm.
Well, it's never, well, for myself. It's always like, well, for my family, because I hate not being able to be there for them. And,
Mhm.
but really, it's for me so that once I'm focusing on myself a little bit, well, then I can give them more
Yeah.
once I'm feeling better, right?
Yeah.
So
That's it.
that's
Yeah,
a
we
big,
deserve a good life too. We
yeah,
deserve to
yeah.
enjoy life too. It's not just, it's a lot about the kids and it's a lot about family, but
It's a
it's
lot,
like
but
it's about us too, and it's important. And you know what? They see how we're living life too, and they see
yes.
what we're doing. And kids benefit from us going through these things. Spouses, family members, the better you're doing, the more you're inspiring other people. And the more
Well,
you know, the more you can help other people, really.
the funny thing is I've actually my son as well, we've gotten some testing done for him,
Mhm.
um, for some of his issues, not related, but just found out he has some deficiencies also, but that kind of was all kind of sparked through here. So,
You
yeah,
can see it now, or you're paying attention, you're like
paying
aware.
attention a little bit more and then just learning how, yeah, that you really
Get
do.
it young, get them young because
Yeah,
it's so much easier.
yeah, and to take a second to kinda do it, like,
Yeah.
even he was like, "Oh, I'm so tired," and I'm like, "Okay,
Mm.
well, let's figure out what's going on
Yeah,
then.
let's
Why is that
detective
happening?"
this.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
so and then
good.
sure enough, there's issues, right, and reasons, so,
Yeah.
yeah, and so that's all part of the learning that I've kind of come across because I never really, went this in depth about
Yeah.
things, so it's pretty
Yeah.
empowering.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I commend you. I mean, anybody that's going through a process like this, it takes you have to be brave, you have to
you do,
be
yeah,
vulnerable. It is a leap of faith in a sense, although I will say like nobody that has gone through this hasn't come out with something on the other end, and it's you're always going to gain and improve in some way or another, and so many stories of like amazing improvements and amazing advancements by the end of 16 weeks. So I am so happy that you were so dedicated, committed, and consistent with everything, and that's really what's brought you to this point and enabled you to get this far. So again, thank you so much. And
nope, thank you.
I know we'll be in touch. I would love for you to update me, of how things are
Absolutely.
going in the future. And if anyone does have questions for Laurie, please, you can ask them in the comments underneath the video, and I'm sure Laurie will be happy to answer them there. But otherwise, we will see you soon. I hope we'll be in touch, and
Yes,
have a
for
really good
sure.
evening, Laurie.
You too, take care, bye.
Okay, bye-bye.